Hi folks, my name is Charles and I'm the host of Go-to-Market Hackers, the show where we go inside the minds of revenue architects, creating systems that deliver winning outcomes. Now, as a startup founder and GTM leader, what gets me excited these days is understanding how the best go-to-market teams are using AI to unlock massive growth. And so in today's episode, I'm interviewing Gabe Larsen, who's the CRO of Atonom. Atonom is an AI startup that's building the autonomous organization. And so in the first part of this interview, we'll talk about how GTM teams can become autonomous organization by integrating AI agents into their workflows. And then in the second part of the interview, we'll talk about how Gabe made the crazy decision to rip out Salesforce to replace it with their own vibe-coded CRM. Gabe, it's really great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining. I know you've been super busy traveling and zigzagging across the US for conferences and to talk about Atonom. So I appreciate you taking the time. Maybe for the audience, you can say a little bit more about yourself, your background. How did you get into this role as a CRO of Atonom? And then we can dive into all the cool stuff you guys are building and also the impressive vibe coding challenge you guys decided to take upon yourself. So
I love the word impressive. I'm glad you used that. I appreciate it. So awesome. Well, Charles, excited to be on, man. Excited to talk about this and some of the things we're doing at Atonom. But yeah, to your point, it's been an interesting journey. Started my career as a banker at Goldman Sachs, did some consulting with Accenture, spent 5 years in the Middle East doing some consulting, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, but stumbled into SaaS. I've had a couple fun runs, did a company called InsideSales.com, kind of that 5 to 100, and it got the addiction of the SaaS world, and then spent the last 5 years with a company out of New York called Customer. It's kind of a ticketing system similar to like a Zendesk. We had a great run there, got bought by Meta. We were their fourth largest transaction, Oculus, Instagram, WhatsApp, and then Customer. But their recent acquisition of Manus, I think, put us a little bit further down the list. But spent 2 years at Meta doing who the heck knows what. And then after 2 years there, the post-COVID world got interesting. So they came to my company and said, if you don't have ads, AI, or VR in your title, you're out. So they kicked our little company back out, spun us back out. And the AI boom was starting to happen, Charles. And I just said, man, I got to jump into this, head first. This is something special. And so I met up with a good friend of mine by the name of Dave Elkington, who was already starting to play with these transformer models. And so we decided to found this company called Atonom, and we'll be talking more about that, but that kind of brings us to current day. So
yeah, super, super exciting. So obviously, there's a lot of things to talk about when it comes to AI, go-to-market, and I feel like Atonom sits right at the intersection of that because you have some interesting use cases you'll be able to talk about. Can you give folks a little bit of a overview of what is Atonom? I think I just saw, by the way, you guys redid your landing page. It looks really good. So what are AI employees or cloud employees? How do you use them? How do they work alongside folks within a go-to-market organization? Walk us through that.
Totally. Yeah, look, I think we're all feeling the shift, right? Things are changing by the day or by the minute in some cases, but what we're seeing out in the market is that in the past, there used to be, more or less this traditional organization where people were growing their companies based on headcount and tools. And what you'd do is you'd go from 10 to 20 to 200 to 500 and people, and you'd continue to add complexity around systems, process, and tools. That's just being fundamentally rejected by boards, by CEOs, by investors, and everyone's being asked to do more with less. And so there's a new type of organization emerging. Microsoft called it a frontier firm. Mark Benioff at Dreamforce referred to it as an agentic organization. We've used the term an autonomous organization, but in its infancy, it really is the same concept. And that is you have to create a new type of organization where employees, and what we refer to as cloud employees, work side by side, where you scale output, not just headcount. And that is a new type of organization. And the fundamental building block of that autonomous organization, we believe, will be a cloud employee. And that's our go-to-market. We basically sell or allow companies to hire these advanced digital workers across marketing, sales, customer success, support, and HR, so that you can ultimately achieve that goal of building an autonomous organization where you scale, results, not headcount.
Makes sense. And you guys went even further in the kind of concept of autonomous employee, because you told me that you essentially, and I know, by the way, caveats, I know things are changing on a weekly basis across the AI world. So what I'm saying now, maybe a month from now won't be the case,
That's
but
right.
you,
You
you,
better
you
get
had
this
talked,
episode out fast. You better get this
yeah,
episode out fast.
exactly. You talked about like there was kind of like the entry level kind of AI employee, right? There was the mid level employee, and then there was the senior employee or the executive.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I
is
mean,
that
what
how we
we
should think of it? And what does that mean? Like, why are you making that distinction?
Yeah, look, I think the world is kind of starting to evolve on the way it thinks about AI, right? And for a long time, we were thinking cost per conversation. We wanted to shove it into SaaS
Right.
platforms and cost per conversations. And
Seats and yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's the world we know. So I don't blame
right.
it. But people have had, in my own experience, Charles, we were trying to kind of do like when I was at Meta, we were doing conversational based pricing and people just, they struggled with it. They struggled with like, how do I plan for that? And what is the definition of a resolved conversation? And how many platform seats do I need? Anyways, trying to shove AI into SaaS has been interesting. I think it'll continue to be interesting.
Right.
So one of the things we're starting to see more of, one from a functionality, but second from a pricing, is that there is more autonomy coming. Are these truly autonomous individuals, and do they
Sure, sure.
we're not quite there, but go with the thought that it's absolutely moving. We used to see, and you're still seeing that with Claude Code and
Yeah.
some of these other tools, it goes out and brings back. It goes out and brings back. But a lot of these things are starting to run a little bit more autonomously. And when they do, they start to feel more like an employee than they do a tool. It feels more like a teammate, less like a tool. And when that click happened, I said to my business partner, I said, hey, why wouldn't we hire one of these agentic personas versus try to go for some sort of like cost usage token nonsense? And so we really like this personification of it. And then in this new type of organization where employees and cloud employees work side by side, why not hire somebody on a salary-based approach? And like a human, you're going to have certain capacity limits, of course, but you would hire, what would you do in an SDR org? You'd probably hire a junior SDR. And guess what? They're probably not going to do as much as a senior SDR. And so we've taken that same approach. Name them.
Super
You don't
interesting.
implement them, you onboard them. You give them a weekly training. When you bring them on, they start at a junior level. You can promote them to a senior, a manager, a director. And with each level comes more capacity, more understanding, more strength, more ability. And so and people have really gravitated to like, oh, I was hiring an SDR, now I'm hiring an AI SDR. That
Right.
makes sense. What's the cost? Anyways, I could be wrong, but my gut
Yeah,
is
yeah.
we're moving more that direction. And so that's where Autonom's going.
That makes sense. I mean, I was having a conversation with another friend where everybody's talking right now about the architecture of these agentic systems and where you have kind of, these agents spawning sub-agents and you have all these complex parent-child relationships between these agents, and the agents can kill their children. I mean, metaphorically, there's just so much going on in in this agentic world. And I think being able to building basically this kind of agentic org chart, the way you kind of explained it, I think makes a lot of sense, where you kind of divide the roles and responsibility between these different agents. You have
Well,
different
and
system
Charles,
prompts, right?
yeah, look, that's a really interesting distinction as well, because to build more complex agents, I think we're not the only ones to discover this, but you've
Right.
got to get away from the workflow type structures that you originally saw in tools like Make or N8N, where it was more deterministic by nature. These multi-agent environments where you have our average AISDR cloud employee actually has about 42 sub-agents that report to the
Wow.
supervisor.
Interesting.
So it is a
Interesting. Okay.
crew of agents that allow you to run not the task, but the job.
Right.
But back to positioning, rather than say you're hiring 42 agents that really run one SDR position and confusing.
Yeah.
What we found is it's a little easier to say, hire Zoe, and Zoe's a cloud employee. Wink, wink, she has 42 sub-agents that basically report to her to be able to do the full job. But that multi-agent environment rolled up to a supervisor. I felt the positioning was easier to say, or hire one
That makes
cloud
sense.
employee, but the back end, to your point, to really run the complexity of what we're talking about, it's got to have that parent, child, and sub-agents, et cetera,
Right.
et cetera.
That makes sense. I feel like I'm getting into the nitty gritty here, but maybe can you walk us through what does it mean to onboard a new employee? There's presumably a lot of organizational knowledge that's stored somewhere in a knowledge base in Slack and who knows where. I'm sure that, part of that onboarding is just like feeding it a whole ton of
That's right.
information,
That's
right? Putting
right.
some
So you
guardrails. What does that look like?
Yeah, yeah. So the onboarding process for us for new kind of cloud employees is, a four-step process. So the first is the name and identification. And so again, maybe a little cheesy, but you do kind of
Yeah.
pick the picture, you kind of give it a name, you identify kind of the role, and you kind of
Right.
just establish that initial piece. The second is the memory component, long-term, short-term, real-time. And we just got to start shoving stuff in. And the consumption on
Sure.
on AI is obviously the knowledge-based capability is very strong. So your website, PDF documents, phone calls, old videos, whatever we can do to start to give it
Sure.
its identity from a memory standpoint. Then we move into the tools section, and that's basically just like you would a regular employee. We need to give it access
Giving
to
it access
Salesforce.
to, yeah.
We need to give it access to the calendaring system so it could schedule meetings. I'm thinking SDR at the moment, but it might be a different tool set for
Right.
customer service versus HR. So you give it access to some of those tools. Then you just actually do what you do with the typical SDR. You just got to kind of have it run on some synthetic data, some old data, practice phone calls, practice
Right.
emails, just to kind of see like, hey, I'm not going to throw you into the wild. Want to put you run some tests, some role play type stuff. So really like that role play section. We have a built-in so it can role play with itself, but it's great to be able to role play with the manager or other SDRs
Right.
just so and then once you're ready, just like you would with the regular SDR, at some point you got to let them into the wild. They're not perfect.
Throw them in the
They
wild.
rarely are, but then you kind of, step forward is putting them into the wild and letting them do its thing. And then you have a coaching session with them, typically daily to start and kind of give them some feedback and some pointers and, just on what they said or how they reacted or some of the things they kind of did. Did they enter the information right into Salesforce? Because ultimately, we want companies to view this. If I've got 5, SDRs, I want Zoe to be the 5th one. And in their reports, I don't want a separate report. I just want
It's so
Zoe to be
interesting.
took another 20 phone calls and had 5 meetings and just like Bill
So,
did. Okay. So it's more like
so
that.
are you basically saying that you have like a daily check-in during the onboarding with your agent, and you just kind of, chat with them, tell them what they did right, what they did wrong, how they need to course correct. So it's basically a very kind of iterative feedback loop. Is that the idea?
Yeah, yeah. So the short answer, yes. And what we found is to make it more real, rather than going into kind of the back end system, most of our clients do coaching via Slack or via phone or we have kind of a
Right.
mobile app. And what that means is you would actually see in Salesforce, and I'm just trying to get tactical for a second,
Yeah.
but I'm looking in Salesforce and I'm seeing some of the conversations, the emails she sent, or some of the things she did.
Right.
And then I'm in Slack, I'm having a conversation with her like, hey, I'm looking at kind of what happened today. I noticed this. And, I think when people bring up like one of the things that happened the other day for my cloud employee on the inbound side is someone asked her about political affiliation. They're like, hey, we're really big in sponsoring this. And where do you guys lean? I don't mean to get political, but
Yeah.
I thought she handled the question okay, but she'd never been asked that question before. And so
Right.
when I saw that she'd asked that question, I looked at her response and I just said, truthfully, when you get questions like that, you can basically just completely avoid it.
Right.
And she puts that in her memory and starts acting accordingly. So it's that type of idea. And once you do that for a little bit, I typically move into kind of a weekly check-in, but I do try to have a weekly review with my cloud employee based on what they're doing. And again, trying to just see as you would
Super
with an
interesting. Yeah.
SDR, what's going
Yeah.
on? How are they doing? How are their conversations? Is their open rate bad? Like what's not
Yeah.
working? Because these things are a little bit iterative.
Love it. This is so interesting. You really pushed the analogy all the way to like, you know, the employee of the future, basically, which is
Well, and the
really
fun thing,
refreshing.
Charles, I think you'll see we've been dabbling in some of the hardware aspects of these
Right.
types of things. And I think that'll be an interesting evolution as well as to kind of see where but one thing
For
at a
sure,
time.
for sure. So AI SDR, and then I want to dive into some other the other cool things you're doing. But so if we dive into specific use cases that Atonom is doing, we talked about AI SDR. What does that mean? There's a lot of things an AI SDR does: list building, enriching, prospecting, CRM stuff, right? Meeting
Great point.
scheduling,
Yeah.
lead
Yep.
qualification. Does it take care of all of that? And how does an AI SDR like that work with a real SDR, an SDR manager? Like, who typically interfaces with the AI and SDR?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd maybe just take it one step real quick
Right.
before we dive into that. Because what we're finding is that when it comes to agentic personalities or agentic titles, there's really 4 to 5 core areas where people are trying to really, I think, move with these kind of, advanced AI agents. Let me just hit them and then
Right.
maybe we could dive
Yeah.
back into that
Sure.
SDR. So certainly into the area of coding, the Claude world, like that's a
Sure.
big area where I think people are jumping in. We're not diving in as much into that in kind of our world. We're doing a couple little things, but not a ton. Second is the customer service world, right? So
Right.
a lot of AI going into that, very, very effective. Another world is the AI SDR or into the sales realm, AI SDR specifically. Next is typically the recruiting world. And then
Right.
last but not least, we're seeing assistants, kind of these like assistant concepts. The reason I bring up those is there's so much ROI in those areas. That's where
Mhm.
organizations are typically starting. We call them cloud employees because there is often a replacement concept there.
Right.
You
Right.
can have a customer service cloud employee and you don't need as many tier 1 cloud employees. You could
Right.
have these cloud employees and then you move those to tier 2. Though that's the layer we typically are entering in. And then what we do is we have other areas that we typically will do, either other cloud employees or cloud assistants. So for example,
Right.
we might enter with like an AI SDR, but then we'll move into a sales engineer or into a sales enablement cloud employee or a sales assistant there. So we'll typically start in one of those core areas where you can get immediate. I mean, I've got case studies where, we put in and we saved a company $12 million annually in customer service costs. That's just so wow that
Right.
then we hit that and then we'll move into another area. So anyways, I just wanted to establish you
Totally.
can
Super
definitely do
helpful.
cloud employees throughout the org, but there's a couple areas where you start. And yeah, AI SDR is one of them. Any
And
quick
I
thoughts on
listen. I also appreciate that you're saying that it does replace actual humans, because sometimes people dance around that. No, 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 we're not going to replace your employees. But at the end of the day, you have these super employees that are able to do so much. You don't need as much headcount, or you need to reorganize your team around, as you said, different tasks, maybe like more advanced support and those type of things.
Well, and the truth is, it's, whether you want to call it replace or support, and I had one client say to me, Gabe, I don't know if humans were ever meant to spend 10 hours on the phone answering password reset. We want to elevate humans to do more meaningful things.
Right.
But ultimately, whether we're elevating humans or replacing the mundane tasks, those entry level places are just so powerful to get the mundane out and then let the people do what they were meant to probably do, which is think, judge, interact, etc. So
Right.
anyways, food for thought.
Makes sense.
So maybe back to that SDR, jump into maybe one of those a little more
Yeah.
deeper. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess I'm curious as how, like, who's managing that SDR, and how maybe those orgs change the structure of, working with an AI SDR. I assume it replaces some SDRs, and so in that case, is it a BDR, like SDR BDR manager, that then kind of pilots these different
Oh man,
AI
yeah, look,
SDRs?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, look, I think the SDR, it's good to kind of think through that because I think the org is changing in general.
yeah,
But what we're typically finding is that if I start at high level, if you have a big SDR team, you still have a human running it, right? So there, let's call it a director level of sales development. And then we're finding that you can kind of split it into 2 arms at the moment. And then you need a support arm. So the inbound SDR team for most companies, that's where SDRs are actually winning, AI SDRs in particular. If you start to say outbound, things get a little muddy, and I'll hit on that in just a second. But so you'd have a leader who's running the inbound SDR team. Now, this leader's DNA is changing. It's not quite the GTM engineer. I think we're
yeah.
already seeing an evolution of, sales ops to marketing ops to GTM engineer to now people are calling it head of agents or AI ops or something. And
Right. Yeah, yeah,
don't get
yeah.
me
Totally.
wrong, it's got that GTM engineer feel, but it is different because we're not talking about flows or
Right.
tables. We're talking more about AI. So anyways, a little bit of a DNA there change, but that person is running an agent or a series of agents, and that inbound stuff is phenomenal. Again, that's like shooting fish in a barrel. I've got companies doing 2, 3, 5,000 inbound inquiries a month. They used to have 35 SDRs, some onshore, some offshore. And wow, AI is great for that. High volume lead demo comes in. And to your point, fascinating to see. We're not talking about little scraper bots here or a little 11 Labs voice bot or something. I'm talking about the job. Lead comes in, webhook created, AI SDR alerted to that. Research is basically done, external research. It goes and finds out. I'm thinking of one example here, a restaurant. It goes out and finds reviews on a restaurant. It goes out and finds, how many stars it has, the cuisine type.
Right.
It then jumps into Salesforce to figure out, is it a current customer? Do we have any interaction here? Cool. Then it goes in and builds a multi-channel cadence. Multi-channel is important here. Again, no human would just do chat by itself. No human would just do phone. They would do phone, email, text, chat, Slack. I don't know, some combo of channels. Right. That often right now, I think that won't be interesting very soon, but at the moment, I'm amazed at how many people are doing AI SDRs on one channel. And I'm like, that's not, no SDR does one channel. If it's not multi-channel, in my mind, it's not even an AI SDR, but that's beside the point. It runs that multi-channel cadence. It runs a full medic band anim qualification process via one of those channels. It then has full routing capabilities to be able to determine sales reps wherever you need to route it to. It hooks to calendar, so it puts a full summary into Zoom, into calendars, then writes everything back to CRM. So as I said, these are multiple agents running up to a supervisor agent, but that inbound process, and you're in your org right now, and now again, if you get 5 inbound leads, this is a different story. But I talked to someone yesterday, 800 a month, like, yeah, if that's your problem, it's a great problem to have, 800 leads a month. And you're not using AI there, shame on you, probably, unless, again, you're selling jumbo jets to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Enterprise deals, AI, that's a whole nother conversation, I think, Charles. But if you've got deals in the SMB world, that's awesome. So back to that structure real quick. So you just have kind of that leader overseeing that inbound motion. And that should be all AI SDR, and that leader's got a little more of a DNA that's different. They still know the strategy, but they've got AI because they're coaching and watching AI agents on a weekly basis on how they're kind of running their business. They know prompting. On the flip side, the enterprise or outbound team, that's a human running humans. And now you're looking at cloud assistants that are supporting those humans, right? Right now, that outbound motion, it just has not successfully been done with AI SDR. They're having too hard of a time on true personalization. They're having a hard time on, people don't want AI phone calls, especially if it's a bigger deal. We're finding 50K and above. AI SDR voice, it's good. I could show you ours. I think it's better than most, but I'm going to spend $100,000 with you and you're reaching out to me with an AI. So phone's a little harder on that front. So we're seeing more cloud assistants helping with research, being a co-pilot. Hey, give me some sample emails. I've got a Slack cloud employee, for example. We call him Dex. I've got BDRs that are humans. They're getting ready to do a reach out. Hey, Dex, can you tell me a little bit about Johnson & Johnson? What's been going on with them? I'm about to reach out to him today. Amazing. Cool. And he brings some information back, news, information, people. Do you know much about John Johnson there? Cool. How do you think I should write an email? What emails do you think I should write? Here's a couple. I don't love that one, but I like this. Boom. And then I send it. It's this co-pilot piece, right? So that's a very interesting point on the outbound. The only thing I'd say last here is this is such a fascinating thing. You got to think of it as hot, cold, and warm. AI for hot leads, it's awesome. For cold, it's just not working very well. Spam calls, spam emails, I don't know.
Interesting.
There's a whole nother world emerging right now, this whole signal-based world, signal-based outbound, signal-based AI, signal stacking with AI, where you basically de-anonymize website visitors, where you get job change alerts. What we used to do with that information, we loved it. We'd use a tool, I won't name them, but we'd signal stack and get all this cool stuff. Then we'd Slack it over to our sales team. And nothing would happen, and nothing happened. They're too busy. They couldn't do it. They couldn't action it. Even in SDRs, but what's happening now is we're signal stacking still. And instead of Frankensteining together multiple tools, again, I won't name them, but think high volume email tools or LinkedIn auto tools, or we're now using cloud assistants or cloud employees, again, intelligent agentic conversation. de-anonymized website visitor, hand it to Zoe. Zoe would run an agentic text and email conversation, answer questions, schedule meetings.
So
Ooh, that's a really interesting emerging use case in that SDR world.
super interesting. I want to go back to a couple things you said. First of all, maybe just double clicking on this last part. Are you saying that your AI SDRs also are able to replace your de-anonymizing tech stacks that you might be using? Or are you saying you still use those and then you hook them up to your system and then
It's
just to clarify? Yeah.
it's the latter at the moment.
Okay.
Now
Got it.
look,
Okay.
there are tools out there that I think are moving that direction, but what we're finding is we're best at the execution layer.
That makes
And if
sense.
you've got
And
signal
not at the,
stacking
yeah.
tools, user gems, Clay, you get all these signals, they're basically there, and you're
Sure.
like, how do I use this? Boom. Now cloud
Makes
employees
sense.
come in multi-agent kind of.
Makes sense. Okay, and I want to go to something else you said earlier. I love the distinction you made around how AI SDRs are great for hot inbound, less good for cold outbound. For the lead qualification for the inbound, you talked about again pre-qual stuff. By that, did you mean that they're doing pre-qual around ICP, around I don't know number of visitors, number of employees, or do they also email or call the prospect in order to do a pre-call the same way an SDR might do pre-qualification calls with a prospect before handing them over to an AEM? Just wanted to
That's
clarify
right.
that
Yeah,
part.
yeah. So think of it, you're trying to mimic. I had one customer say, the best thing about this inbound AI SDR is that it does exactly what I've always wanted my actual human SDR team to do. And so what you typically want a real human SDR to do is a new lead comes in and you want to make sure that it fits the ICP, that it's the right thing, that it
Right.
isn't your
Sure.
current customer, so you do want to run some checks to see if it's kind of like the right person.
Definitely.
Then you
Definitely.
want to reach out within seconds. I had one customer, we improved their lead response time by 1,000%. So you typically want to
Insane.
respond
Amazing.
quickly, right? But that's very hard for SDRs to do, especially at 9 p.m. at night. You wouldn't
So,
believe
so
how many appointments we're scheduling at 9 p.m. at night via AI
no, it makes sense.
SDRs.
So you're able to basically, follow up with somebody within what, minutes? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, seconds,
Yeah.
minutes,
Yeah.
because again, you're going to hit them with email, phone, text, maybe a couple
Sure.
different
Makes sense.
channels.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then,
And then
did you say,
you'd run the full qualification. So you'd reach out to them. Let's use phone for an example.
yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
for some clients, that's great. And it just has an agentic conversation. Just, hey, I saw you got the
Wow.
demo
That's
request.
insane.
I saw that they've done the research. I saw that you're a Thai cuisine, or I saw on your LinkedIn profile, so you can bring in some of that personalization. Wanted to see if I could get you with one of our reps. Looks like your zip
Right.
code is this, so I'm going to probably get you with Billy. But before that, could I, quote unquote, qualify you? A couple questions are
Wow.
asked. They ask a couple
Insane.
questions, and then it's like, look, I got Billy. And we're finding if you can schedule within 3 days, that's one of this data stuff is a whole nother piece, Charles, where, we've now got tons of AI SDRs running across dozens and dozens of clients, and that behavioral data is being assembled. One of the data points we found is that if you don't schedule a meeting within 3 days of those inbound leads, your conversion rate, might sound obvious, drops significantly. So now all SDRs are programmed to kind of really push to say, hey, can I get that meeting? Billy's available today or tomorrow. He's got 9 and 12 versus if you would have talked to me 9 months ago, what did the AI SDRs do? When do you want to meet?
Right.
I want to meet in 2
Totally.
weeks from now. Anyways, little things like that are being auto-learned and pre-programmed back in.
Totally.
And that data piece is going to be fascinating. But
I-
it does, back to the point, it kind of does that full interview.
Super interesting. Coming from the enterprise world, it's true that freaks me out. Like, I assume these are smaller ticket, leads.
It's a
Meaning,
great
like,
point.
right? If I had 100,000, if I had, Coca-Cola, come inbound for a you were at customer, CMO at customer, you'd want to have an actual person taking that call and not an AI CR. So I assume that maybe there's some nuance around the type of customers and the size.
And that
of
would
those
be
accounts.
I'm glad you bring it up because look, I think there's just not enough data yet to know. And truthfully, the world quite isn't there. Like,
Right.
I could give you another example, but you hit on one really important point. Each customer is slightly different. Phone, email, text. Definitely the majority of where AI is winning is high volume, lower ticket items, 100%.
Makes sense. Yeah,
Once
makes
you
sense.
start to go into that. I'm selling jumbo jets to, again, I say Saudi Arabia, like
Yeah,
it's
makes
$2
sense.
million. I don't see AI playing a role there, type of thing.
Makes
Now
sense.
that's
Makes sense.
extreme, but the concept's totally there.
Makes sense.
You're going to see it continue to change. Like we had such an interesting example on the customer service side where we found these businesses calling in and
Right.
they were offended at first. They said, I don't want to talk. You're an AI. I don't want to talk to an AI. Get me to humans. And when we would transfer them over, we made one change in the talk track for this AI cloud employee that said, hey, I'm an AI person, but honest, I can get you to a human. I'm looking at the queue right now. It's like 3 minutes. So we can call you back. Or if you just give me a chance, you might be surprised. You might be. When they gave that AI customer service rep a chance, the NPS rates were much higher than they were with
Interesting.
humans. The knowledge was better. The talk track was better. The timing was better. So I think we're in this interesting phase right now. Like you said, like a lot of us are offended to talk to AI. But boy, when people actually experience it, they're like, this is much better than the $50,000 sales rep, the
That's true.
$15 an hour customer service rep. They know everything. We saw call times on the customer service side with that client go down from 18 minutes to 3 minutes because there was no, let me go put you on hold and find crap. So
Right. Right.
we're
Right.
in an interesting period, but I wouldn't be surprised if that SMB versus enterprise slowly changes, as a lot of us are going to prefer AI interactions
Makes
here soon.
sense. Makes sense. I agree. And I have had back and forth interaction, mostly over email with AI SDRs that are way better and more sophisticated than real SDRs. So I totally agree with you there. I was going to say, before we shift topics a little bit, from your perspective, because you've been doing this quite a lot in the GTM space, what's a misconception? What's a mistake GTM teams are making when it comes to adopting AI? Or maybe like, what's your hot take on like what people are getting wrong with AI and the mindset shift they have to do? Or something that you're seeing where it's like, this isn't the way forward. And you did drop a couple things, throughout this conversation, but curious if you've found something that's blatant in your eyes where AI
Yeah,
adoption is
look, yeah,
still not being thought the right way.
yeah, look, a bunch of things. Let me see if I can just hit a couple of them. One is, AI can't do what you can't do. So a lot of times we get on with people and they're like, I want it to be the CEO of my company, or I want it to be an enterprise sales rep. And it's like, how do you do that? And they're like, well, we don't know. We just thought it could do it better. And it's like, if you can't tell it what to do right now, AI is here to take mundane processes and do it better and faster. But if you don't know the process, you don't know what you're doing, you can't explain it. It can't do it right now, in my opinion. So that would certainly be one of them. The second thing is a lot of the roles, like what roles actually work and what roles don't work. And so I think you got to go into that, like I was saying, high volume, mundane kind of areas. Those are where people.
Repetitive tasks, things where there's a process, things where,
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
that makes
yeah.
sense.
Look,
Yeah.
people come on and they're like, can't it do, this role? And it's like, it can, you got to find the right area to do it in. I'd probably say the third thing that I think companies, there's just so much noise out there. This one's a hard one, but there's just a new AI company like me every single day. And there's so much wrappers, it's literally just
Right.
ChatGPT with the wrapper. And so, I'd say you got to find case studies. You got to see real stories.
Right.
PowerPoint, you got to watch out for a little bit. Fourth thing is security. I've gotten multiple companies, you see an Anthropic leak or something like that. But I'd probably say after pricing, security is often the number one question that I get asked, and it should be.
Interesting.
If you're not talking to someone who's SOC 2, minimally ISO, 2700
Yeah.
HIPAA, like it's just you just can't even mess with it right now. It's
Yeah.
just your business cannot handle that. And these startups, I know I'm one of them, so take it with a grain of salt, but leak a little bit of data or something goes out, it gets into the wrong model. So those would be just four things that I think are coming up that you just
That makes
be a little
sense.
bit careful and cautious of.
Makes sense. Super, super interesting. I wanted to now shift a little bit to the topic because so what got us talking is I saw you writing a comment on LinkedIn, which kind of shocked me, right? Obviously, vibe coding, a lot of people are talking about vibe coding, and you hear about these cool, fun toy projects and these apps that people are launching. But I hadn't heard of anyone bold enough to vibe code their CRM. And so that
Bold
really
enough
caught
or
my
stupid enough? Bold enough or stupid enough?
Yeah, exactly. So I saw that comment and I was like, wow, Gabe is legit, and I want to hear about this. And so this is the kind of the second part of the podcast, which is would love to understand kind of why you guys decided to vibe code your own CRM internally. maybe kind of like the story behind kind of what
Sure.
led you
Yeah.
to do that, and how you built it. What are the capabilities? And I know you said you would be able to show some screenshots of what you guys have built. Then basically, like, yeah, maybe we can go from there. But that's also a super interesting story, and so I'm curious to learn more.
That was a great intro, by the way. So yeah, the short answer here, and I'll see if I can pull up maybe just a couple screens that we've been
Yep.
trying to play with here a little bit so you guys can kind of see it. But yeah, the short answer is we did. We tried to vibe code. We didn't try, we did it. Question is how good it is. But we vibe coded our CRM using Lovable. And actually it's created an amazing relationship with Lovable. We done a video testimonial. I've been on with their, I mean, they're a small team, by the way. So but
Crazy.
really doing some fun stuff with them and really learned a lot more about their business. But that's the quick answer.
So what's
Now,
the
why?
what's the background story? Like, why would you start there? There are so many things you can do. Nope, you guys went right into the hardest or like the most sensitive part, right? The brain of the GTM organization. You're
Okay,
like, let's just rip it
so
out
here's
and
the
build it
back.
ourselves.
Yeah, so here's the backstory. We're a small AI startup, right? So you got to put that we're not 10,000 people, right? We're basically,
Sure.
call it 30 plus people. So not very big, mostly
Sure.
engineers, small go-to-market team. I'm running sales and marketing. And yeah, we have Salesforce, because what many of us, and I'm hoping some of you will nod your head when I say this, we've been taught that even as a small startup, you should be using one of these really enterprise grade CRMs because CRM is so important to the business and you can't not have the best of the best. It's the brain of I don't know where I got brainwashed along the way, but at some point I'm looking with my head of finance, I'm looking at our expenses and I'm like, we're in the range of like 30 to 40 grand for our sales force. We have like 30 to
Right.
40 people. And I'm just thinking, this is a lot of money. And so I
Right.
walk around to each department and I'm quizzing and walk around each department. It's basically 2 rooms. So it's just, hey
Right.
guys, like who's using Salesforce? This is a lot of money. Tell me
Right.
you're getting crazy value out of it. Silence, crickets, silence, crickets. The sales guy's like, I kind of am using what you'd assume the basic functionality, I mean, a couple leads. We don't get thousands of inbound leads ourselves, but
Right.
leads are kind of coming in. We've got some basic stages. Reporting's pretty choppy. I'm just listening in this meeting doing about this right here, like, oh my goodness, 40 grand. And
Right.
I've only got a couple salespeople. And I'm thinking, I got 2 people using this for about 30 minutes a week, and I'm paying 40 grand. I'm like, is this really the way things have to be? And it was almost a spiritual moment. No, I'm kidding. It wasn't a spiritual moment, but it was one of those like, I just can't do that. And so I immediately canceled the Salesforce contract with no plan in place. And that was probably maybe the beginning of the end. I just was so frustrated. I was
For a
like,
lot of people, that would give them cold sweats, and they have a hard time sleeping at night. But you just like ripped it out overnight.
well, that's the beauty of being in a startup. Like you just don't have to like debate all this hocus pocus for a
Right.
while. Like no one's using it. Great. It's coming up for renewal. We're done, And so we nixed it with no plan in place. And then that was the beginning of the vibe coding solution. I'm like, get everything out of sales, get it into Google Docs. I don't care what's going on. Just get it out. I'm
Amazing.
done with the CRM. So out of a little bit of rage, we just start dumping things into Google Docs, and the team's definitely a little frustrated for those that were using it. And they kind of start on this journey of just piecing together Google Docs while we interviewed all the other major players for CRM, the HubSpots of the world, the Zohos, the Atios, whatever.
Right.
In the meantime, my CFO comes to me and he said, head of finance, he loves Lovable. He's been building some apps for his kids and stuff like that. And he said, hey, would you partner with me and see if we could just the guys are just using Google Docs right now. You're
Right.
frustrated with all these other conversations. You mind if I why don't we just start playing with something that's an upgraded version of Google Docs? And that was a key moment, because going from Salesforce to Lovable would have been probably maybe a big shock to the system. But you go from Salesforce to Google Docs and everyone already hated my guts anyways. By then moving from nothing to Lovable, to that vibe coded CRM, it actually, the team, and truthfully, we sat down and in 3 hours, we built basically a really rudimentary version. And maybe I could flash some of these kind of screenshots here. I'm going to flash some just so you could kind of see it. Are you seeing this? These are,
Yeah. Oh, perfect.
there you go.
Yeah, perfect.
So look,
that's
dashboard, partners, leads, accounts, contacts, opportunity. I mean, you're going to say, Gabe, this kind of looks like a regular CRM. Well, we just kind of started.
It's great.
So these are all my opportunities and these are kind of our stages and, the dates. And honest to goodness, people say, I'm lying and stuff, but in 3 hours, and I say we, but, I'm sitting with my head of finance. He's doing most of the vibe coding. We're just kind of, one night,
vibing together.
Drinking some root beers, we're drinking some root beers out here in Salt Lake City. And, he's playing around with stuff. And in 3 hours, I was like, damn, this is not bad. I'm playing around with some of the functionality. And I showed it to a couple guys the next morning, on the sales team and the marketing team. And they're like, this is so much better than Google, can we jump into this immediately? And, what then started as a little bit of kind of a side project joke while I've been interviewing, and truthfully, I took another CRM conversation interview just 2 weeks ago. I'm not opposed to it. In the meantime, we've just started to build this out more and more. We've just finalized, I think it's in here, our partner kind of portal where, we're tracking all of our partners and their commission structures and stuff like that. So now, but that was a key, and we could go into lessons learned and things I hate, but going from a startup that was more or less using Google, Excel spreadsheets, and moving to Lovable, that small step's been so much better. And then to be able to, at any point, change things easily has been great. But the big key that we've found now that we're probably, call it 2 months in, is, we used to have somebody part-time as a Salesforce admin.
Right.
I didn't quite realize this. People are like, do you want to maintain this? And it's like, we literally had somebody part-time as a Salesforce admin before. We now have somebody part-time as a CRM admin now. It's just doing what we want rather than being confined to kind of what they want. Absolutely. And the nice thing is when people are like, Gabe, this is your brain. How do you not use a big CRM for that? It's like, I actually usually say it is our brain. How would you give up your brain to somebody else? All of our cloud employees hooked to this new CRM in the way we want it to, APIs and data configuration. And it's a conversational CRM, the capabilities to have a real conversation with this CRM now. I don't ever look up reports. I just jump in and I'm like, hey, talk to me about the deals that have moved this week. There's a lot of capabilities that you'd only find in more modern CRMs probably, but this is
amazing.
One of the most important parts of our business. And I'm outsourcing it to somebody who built a CRM from 2000. I want to build it the way we want to build our new world, which is the autonomous organization. I do. It's my brain. I want to own it. I don't want to kind of give it to somebody. That was the longer version, but that's kind of the quick story.
No, but that's great. Super helpful. But I do have some follow-up questions. So it sounds like there's a chat interface as well that you can chat with it and it'll just kind of spit out whatever question you have there. That's really great. Did you bake in some reporting as well? If you want to see, hey, what were my the board with the different AEs and, what were the close rates on deals in the last quarter, all that. You can dive in there. Amazing.
Yeah. And sorry, this is so grainy, but yeah, the reporting capabilities, I prefer the conversational CRM stuff because I'm a conversational guy, but the reporting is top notch.
Another question that obviously comes to mind is integrations, right? You have your CRM. Typically, there's a lot of things plugging in to pull data in or push it out. Do you have integrations? What does that look like?
Yeah, sorry, just kind of another view right there of kind of maybe some of the,
super
you're
cool.
seeing some of the stuff. But anyway, some of the different reporting that we've kind of been playing around with. But
very nice.
Yeah, so far so good. We're again you got to always bring it down a little bit, but we're mostly running our cloud employees through it because our cloud employees are doing things from marketing to sales to customer service to financial analysts. So we really mostly wanted our tool to hook to it.
That makes sense.
And that's been probably the most impressive thing. But yeah, look, web leads are coming into it. So it's hooking to kind of our website. Our
Yeah, your
chat tool kind of
forms, et
runs
cetera.
into that.
Makes sense.
It does work well so far, kind of merging with we do use like an instantly, we kind of some of the email stuff. That's
Super
a
cool.
tool that's been fine. So I can't tell you it's hooks to 10,000 items, but at the
But
moment, for again, a team of 40, it's fine. Yeah, it's been
again,
good.
you don't need to boil the ocean. And as you said, your reps and your team was probably using 20% of Salesforce, capabilities anyways. So
And that's it. Like when people are like, you can't replace Salesforce Vibe. I just got a newsletter from a guy like he's like, nobody's vibe coding HubSpot. It's like, but no one needs to vibe code HubSpot. Like I don't know what Salesforce has these days. I think it's been 50 years of building on top of each other, so I'm sure it's a Frankenstein. But yeah, opportunities, accounts, moving deals, getting leads, running forecasts, hooking, getting emails. Like I don't know what people are doing with CRM, but for us, for the basic needs, so we've not rebuilt Salesforce. We've built a modern sales tool that I can talk to and helps me do my job. So that is a big difference. I'm not trying to
totally.
rebuild Salesforce.
I did want to share my screen for a second. There was a great talk from Dharmesh from HubSpot who talked about why it's a bad idea to vibe code your CRM. This is what he showed. He was like, if there's a tool internally in your company that requires high maintenance and which has wide use, a CRM is definitely not what you want to be vibe coding internally. That said, if it's a low maintenance, narrow use, then yeah, that makes sense. But basically his pitch, which I understand. And again, like I really
Totally.
loved Dharmesh. He's great. I did like this diagram. I thought it was a really great thing, way to paint things. But
Well, this
clearly,
is going to be, I think, well, but Charles, that this is going to be it's funny because we have these agentic, cloud employees that we're like, hey, don't go vibe code your own cloud employee that you got to maintain. We're a outsourced, managed service provider of
right,
AI agents,
right.
So it'll be very interesting to see where those lines fall. Will everybody just vibe code everything themselves? Is there certain things you shouldn't do? I don't know. For each company, it's up to them. But it's funny because we're in a business of hoping that not everything is vibe coded themselves, but then we went and vibe coded our CRM. So.
A couple other questions there. So one, I really like that you emphasize that you already had a Salesforce admin that was working on Salesforce.
Did
You're just those same hours are now being used to create a custom CRM that's purpose built for you guys. And
I'm
I think
glad
it's
you
so
bring that up because
important. No,
that
it's so
is the
important.
biggest question. It's the biggest question I get. Like,
Maintenance, right? People
how
are like,
do you
oh, it's
maintain it?
stupid. Yeah, exactly.
I'm
Exactly.
like, we were already maintained. We did not realize, but we literally had a half person dedicated to all this stuff. So it really has been a like for like on that front,
So,
100%.
looking back, is there anything you do differently? Would you advise other founders of, let's say, small to medium organizations to, potentially vibe code their CRM because you guys have found it, the experience pretty smooth?
Yeah.
Any potential drawbacks? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I would just say you got to understand what you're doing. And I don't, I've told people I'm not married to our CRM forever.
Right.
We're a fast moving, quick company. And so this is the great solution to now. My world in AI changes honestly every day. So I might have a different story for you tomorrow. But in a world that moves fast, I would just say, look, this is a really good option for creating. And I'm not even, I'm trying not to call it a CRM. I try to
Right.
call it our brain or, our
Yeah.
data source or something because it's a startup. Yeah, look, if you want to just get going and you feel like I did, like you have to raise money from a VC and you have to hire 50 people and you have to buy Salesforce and all the right tools, like, look, I think those barriers are starting to break, but you need to understand what it is and what it's not. So it isn't Salesforce. It is
Right.
an upgraded Excel spreadsheet. It works great for it. It has its limitations.
Sure.
So far, I've not run into that many for what I need. But I think that would be my biggest takeaway is just don't
Yeah.
think you need to build Salesforce. Just build what you need. And then when you're ready, you find something that's bigger, faster, and cheaper, then move to that. And I would just say make decisions on the daily basis rather than planning for 10 years ahead. You just can't anymore. You just
Love
can't.
it. Love it. Makes sense. So listen, over the past, hour, we've covered a lot of topic around the autonomous organization, AI employees, vibe coding your CRM. Any final thoughts you have maybe for founders, GTM leaders, or operators Any, I don't know, parting words of wisdom,
Oh,
anything else
yeah.
you want to share?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'd probably say just a couple things. One is, yeah, the AI thing is real. It's not this magic that can do anything. You've got to find the right places, right time, but experiment quick, change quick. I think that's super duper important. If you're not already playing with Claude, if you haven't done AI experiments, you should have. It's got to be in the right place at the right time. And then with this kind of vibe coding stuff, the build versus buy is going to continue to be something that you should debate it often. And I don't have the answer, but you're going to have to make quick decisions. You might want to build your CRM, quote unquote. You might want to buy cloud employees. You might want to build some of your own assistants. But whatever you do, the name of the game is speed right now. And so don't delay the decisions. Run it. If it works, keep going. If it doesn't, don't be afraid to pivot, because the name of the game right now is, I think, pivot and go.
Love it. So don't be afraid to rip stuff out, rebuild, and be dynamic
Yeah, look,
for
you
the
just can't,
constantly
right? Like,
shifting winds.
yeah, and I know that sometimes, I mean, look, if you're a large organization, it's harder, but I think we're all using Chat GPT, and then we just made a change to Claude, and it might
Sure.
be from Claude, like, who knows, but don't be afraid to change some of these things. Those days of getting 4-year contracts, like, if you're signing 5-year contracts with SaaS vendors, that'd be another thing. I wouldn't do anything more than 12 months. Never, ever, ever. Even that makes me nervous. So that you just got to be ready to change and change quick.
Super interesting. Listen, this has been a fascinating conversation, and I'm really excited to see where Atonom goes, how you guys continue to reshape this industry, how this concept of AI employees continues to evolve. So super interesting. Where can people find you? Is LinkedIn the best place to find you?
Yeah,
I also saw you have
man.
a podcast, so you're all over the web, right?
No, man, look, I love the content game. So yeah, we've got the Talk AI podcast. I've been doing more, TikTok. I'm a TikTok guy. I'm an Instagram
Nice.
guy. I like the YouTube shorts. LinkedIn, I do my daily rant on some random topic. Today it was about dealing with people. I'm in these calls and they flip the recording button on, and it always just makes me sit up a little bit straighter. So I was debating that with somebody, but anyways, yeah, find me on LinkedIn, one of those channels. Would love to chat.
Perfect. I'll put all the info in the show notes. Gabe, it was really, really great to have you on. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your wisdom, and your hot takes. And really excited to see where this goes. And obviously we'll stay in touch. And maybe in a year from now, you'll have one of the best CRMs ever built, and that'll be the main thing you guys are selling.
Yeah, or truthfully, maybe I'll be on Salesforce. I wouldn't promise anything. I wouldn't promise it.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Gabe. Good to chat.